I continued to live in the building, but the elevator no longer held the same fear for me. Instead, it was a reminder of the journey I had undertaken, the lives I had touched, and the peace I had helped to bring. I knew that the 13th floor would always be a part of the building's history, but it was no longer a place of darkness and despair. And so my life returned to normal, but with a newfound sense of purpose and understanding. I had faced my fears, uncovered the truth, and brought peace to those who had been forgotten. The 7th floor was still my sanctuary, but now it was also a place of remembrance, a tribute to the lives that had been lost and the spirits that had found their way home.
I stood there, frozen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. It was almost as if it was calling my name, beckoning me to step into the void. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, and my vision began to blur. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then, as suddenly as it had stopped, the elevator jerked back to life. The doors groaned shut, and the display flickered back to the 7th floor. I stumbled out of the elevator, my legs barely supporting me. I collapsed onto the floor of my apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what happened tonight, and I'm not sure I ever want to find out. But one thing is certain, I'll never look at the elevator in my building the same way again. And I'll definitely be taking the stairs from now on. The next morning, I woke up with a start, my heart still racing from the remnants of the nightmare that had haunted my sleep. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream, but the memory of the glowing 13 on the elevator display was seared into my mind. I knew I had to talk to someone about it, to make sense of what had happened. I called my best friend Sarah and told her everything. She listened intently, her voice filled with concern. "That's really creepy. Maybe you should talk to the building manager or something. There has to be an explanation." I decided to take her advice. I went down to the manager's office, my hands trembling slightly as I recounted the events of the previous night. The manager, a middle-aged man with a perpetually stern expression, listened to me with a mix of skepticism and amusement.
As I made my way back to the elevator, the voices grew softer and the shadows began to fade. The elevator doors closed and I was transported back to the 7th floor, back to the safety of my apartment. But I knew that my journey was far from over. Over the next few weeks, I delved deeper into the history of the building. I spoke to historians, visited archives, and even consulted with paranormal experts. I uncovered the names of the workers who had lost their lives, and I learned about the circumstances of their deaths. I discovered that their families had never been given proper closure, and their stories had been buried along with the 13th floor. I decided to organize a memorial for the workers, a way to honor their lives and give them the peace they deserved. I reached out to their families, and together we held a ceremony in the building's lobby. We shared stories, shed tears, and paid our respects to those who had been forgotten. As the ceremony came to a close, I felt a sense of warmth and lightness, as if a great weight had been lifted. The whispers in the elevator had ceased, and the cold that had once seeped into my bones was gone. The 13th floor was finally at peace, and the spirits of the past could rest.
13th floor? He chuckled. There's no 13th floor in this building. You must have imagined it. Maybe you were just really tired. I insisted that I knew what I saw, but he dismissed my concerns with a wave of his hand. Elevators can malfunction, you know? It probably just showed a random number. You should get some rest. Frustrated and still unsettled, I left his office. I knew what I had experienced was real, and I wasn't going to let it go so easily. I decided to do some research on my own. I spent the afternoon in the local library, poring over old newspapers and building records. I found out that my building had a dark history. Decades ago, during its construction, there had been a series of accidents on the 13th floor. Workers had reported strange occurrences, and some had even claimed to see shadowy figures lurking in the corners. The accidents had been so severe that the builders had decided to omit the 13th floor entirely, hoping to erase the bad luck associated with it. But it seemed that the past couldn't be so easily erased. As I read through the yellowed newspaper clippings, I felt a growing sense of dread. The whispers I had heard in the elevator, the cold that had seeped into my bones. It all made sense now. The 13th floor was still there, lingering in some unseen dimension, a remnant of the building's dark past.
I knew I had to confront my fears. That night, armed with a flashlight and a racing heart, I entered the elevator once more. I pressed the button for the 7th floor, but as the elevator ascended, I steeled myself and pressed the button for the 13th floor. The elevator came to a halt, and the display lit up with the ominous 13. The doors creaked open, revealing the dark, empty landing once again. This time, I stepped out, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but I pressed on. I needed to see what was out there, to understand what had happened to me. As I walked further into the abyss, the whispers coalesced into voices, voices from the past. I could hear the echoes of the workers who had lost their lives, their voices filled with sorrow and pain. I could see shadowy figures moving in the corners, their forms flickering in and out of existence. I realized that the 13th floor was a place of trapped souls, a limbo where the spirits of the past were bound. They were reaching out to me, trying to communicate their stories, their unfinished business. I felt a deep sense of sadness and empathy for them, and I knew that I had to help them find peace. I spent hours on the 13th floor, listening to the voices and trying to understand their messages. I promised them that I would uncover the truth about what had happened to them, that I would give them the closure they so desperately needed. I've lived on the 7th floor my whole life, and the elevator has always behaved just fine. But tonight, it stopped at a floor that doesn't even exist. I live in a typical high-rise apartment building, and the 7th floor has always been my sanctuary. The elevator, an old but reliable contraption, has always faithfully stopped at the official floors. 1, 2, 3, up to 7. There's never been any issue, not once. But tonight, something inexplicable happened.
I had just finished a late shift at work and was looking forward to the comfort of my bed. The lobby was dimly lit as usual, and the hum of the elevator was almost soothing. I stepped in, pressed the button for the 7th floor, and waited as the doors groaned shut. The elevator began its ascent, the soft music playing in the background doing little to mask the creaking of the cables. Then it happened. The elevator came to a halt, and the display lit up with a floor number that sent a chill down my spine. 13. My building doesn't have a 13th floor. No one ever mentions it. It's like an unspoken rule. My heart pounded as I stared at the glowing red numbers. I quickly pressed the button for the 7th floor again, but nothing happened. The doors didn't close. Panic began to set in, and I frantically pressed the stop button, but it was unresponsive. The doors slowly creaked open, revealing a dark, empty landing. There were no walls, no lights, just an abyss of darkness. A faint whisper echoed through the air, sending shivers down my spine. I wanted to step out, to confront whatever was out there, but my legs felt like lead. It was as if an unseen force was holding me back, warning me not to proceed. If it gave you chills, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't get lost between worlds, and write in the comments, are you sure you woke up in your own world? See you in the next story.